Andy Graham, Big C Marketing. How are you doing today?
John Jones. I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. So today we're going to talk about the new customer study from World 50. Are you ready?
I am so ready. I'm the most ready I've ever been.
What's the most exciting thing that's happened in the last 24 hours within your life?
We just got back from Colorado. We just took a huge trip to Colorado, which we thought was going to be really fun, and it ended up being a lot of hassle. We did some good hiking and got out in the mountains, but it was one of those things where we had the inclination to cancel it, didn't cancel it, maybe should have canceled it. I don't know.
Well, more to unpack there, but we'll get to business. Okay, so this study by World 50, pretty comprehensive study. They've got about 4,800 members in about 1,400 or so companies, just from looking at their website. And the beginning of this report is pretty bold. So I'm just going to read their headline. They use words like "forever altered," "beyond return," "nothing will ever be the same again." So, I just wanted to kind of ask you, like, their big finding is that 90% of customer behavior has changed either significantly or moderately, which is a pretty big claim. Like, what's your main takeaway here? Is this causing any changes in your current best thinking about customer experience? How are you applying this to the stuff that you do?
That's a good question. And I think if I think about even how I behave as a consumer or as a customer, I, I know that I've changed significantly since 2019, but I don't know that I attributed all of that to the pandemic itself. I think it's the way that things have been moving. But the truth is, whether it was the pandemic or not, people are very different than they were 4 or 5 years ago and have different expectations. Even if we just look at the B2B SaaS marketplace and how it's exploded. I mean, we're living in the golden age of B2B tools, and I'm a sucker for all of them. So I'm the first person to sign up. But yeah, the way that I buy those things is a lot different than it was 4 or 5 years ago.
That's interesting. So you're right. A lot of, if you read this report, which I would encourage folks to go do, a lot of the things that they talk about are sort of attached to or attributed to the pandemic, but it very well could be kind of an accelerant. Where people were changing anyway, or people, like, customers always change, and but the pandemic, I do think, sped things up. So one of they've got 7 or 8 findings we're going to go through here. And the second one is that people want the predictable. And so their little text says, after so much turbulence and change, customers are reaching out for experiences, products, and services that promote a sense of rhythm or safety. What do you think about that comment about the desperate quest for normal? How are you seeing that? Are customers really searching for this with products and services? Are they just expecting companies to meet them where they are? Like, how does that resonate with what you're seeing?
I think everybody was kind of thrown into a strange world of unfamiliarity in the pandemic, where we had to do everything online, even the things we weren't used to doing online, or we had to go without, or we had to completely think about how we were going to do them. I mean, even just thinking of the fact that I just booked a campground for next summer's 4th of July weekend, because the way that we travel has changed, and you have to book access to things so much farther in advance in a way that we never had to do before. And so a lot of spontaneity has been taken out of the game. And I think there is just a level of familiarity that, they say familiarity breeds contempt, but it also breeds comfort, and comfort is the enemy, right, of perfection, or comfort is the enemy of improvement. But I think that people want that familiarity because it's easy, because it's comfortable. And I think that being so uncomfortable for so long has made people a little bit exhausted. We're a little bit tired of trying to do things a new way or a different way or approach them in a new way. And I see this even in my family. I say I booked this campsite, but my brother and sister-in-law who often camp with us are like, they're not living that life. They don't want to book a campsite a year in advance just to be able to go have fun. Camping should be something we can do fairly spontaneously. And so they've kind of gone back to just saying, well, we don't have to do it then, whereas I'm kind of embracing whatever that new normal is, like it or not.
The new normal.
Yeah.
I wonder if we're losing anything by needing to be or desperately seeking that comfort or safety, because you're right. A lot of growth and fulfillment happens when you're being pushed a little bit.
Yeah. And I mean, I also recognize that I'm an entrepreneur, and entrepreneurs were a little bit of a different breed, right? We like change. We're fairly risk tolerant. We're willing to sort of grow and change in ways that I think a lot of folks are not. And so when you talk about the new customer, you're probably not honestly talking about me.
Right.
I am, I'm living on the fringe over here and somebody who's willing to take these leaps and try things in a different way. But if I look at my family or my parents or the people that we serve as our clients and our clients' clients and customers, they really do. They want to know exactly if they do A, they're going to get to B is going to take them to C, and have that be there for them.
Groovy. All right, number 3. The third pillar that World 50 mentions is that omnichannel isn't optional. You are a phenomenal marketer and work with a lot of phenomenal marketers. Can you explain more about what they mean by omnichannel isn't optional?
We can't. Omnichannel is a tough word for me because omni means everywhere, and I don't think there's very few of the clients, at least that we work with, that are mid-market and below, can actually be omnichannel. They have to be in multiple places though. And so if you look at the ad campaigns that we build, for instance, we're no longer just saying we're going to advertise on social. You can't just be on social. You've also got to be in programmatic and in search and in all these other places where people live and where they show up and where they're spending their time. You also have to be in their physical lives, whatever that looks like. And so talking about brand recognition only happens if you're seeing that brand throughout your life popping up here and there and here and there. And sometimes that's paid advertising, and sometimes it's organic or social, or it's earned media, all of those things. But you can't, there's no one watching Netflix that's just watching Netflix, right? They all have the second screen. And I've been seeing some really neat examples of that where we were watching something the other day, and a commercial came on live TV, and they had a QR code on the screen. And it was just such a brilliant move that they understood. I hadn't seen this before, and maybe I'm the only crazy one aside from the Coinbase ad on the Super Bowl. Yeah, which was, of course, huge. But this was like a small, I'm pretty sure it was like a wildlife nonprofit that had a QR code just to learn more about whatever it was they were working on. And so I thought that's kind of a neat change where you can actually engage people knowing that they're doing something else while they're watching, but engage them in the way that meets them where they're at. And I think that's a big part of that new customer is like, we have to be where they are or thinking the way they're thinking.
Well, they do talk a lot about the pandemic in this. And if you remember, of course, there's this sort of rush to embrace digital and only digital for a little bit. Mm-hmm. And that really swung back the other way. So at the beginning, there was this, well, if you don't figure out how to run your business totally remote, then you're going to lose. And then by the end, again, it's like, man, we're craving human reaction or interactions. And so that in-person piece, it's not just about consumer products. If you're selling to other businesses, they want a relationship with you, and it's not just over a Zoom screen, right? And that was almost like a whiplash kind of thing for me. And it's interesting that they mentioned that here. It's not just about digital experiences. The end of the pandemic accelerate the desire to interact in person. And I think that's so super important in any business relationship as well. There's a lot of in-person parts of that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it's funny because even though we are a remote company, we have found in person to take on different meanings, not just with our clients and customers, but my business partner and I both like working in an office with other humans.
Mm-hmm.
And we came to realize that that didn't mean we had to work in an office with our own team or our own humans. But here I am at an office in a co-working building, and he's got an office in a co-working building, so that we still are surrounding ourselves with that community and those connections. And they're not necessarily always a sort of business relationship, whatever that looks like. But we had a lot of clients during the pandemic who shifted their entire trade show or conference budgets into digital marketing. And a lot of them kept it there and then added another budget for the travel and trade shows when those came back online, for sure. So I just think there is value, there's value in both of those things. So.
That's interesting. So you said that they took their entire budget, put it into digital marketing, but then it must have been valuable for them to
Yep.
not want to cannibalize that later for the trade shows.
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly. Yep.
Cool. All right. Number 4, when World 50 talks about personalization and how people expect more and more content to be known about them.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like it used to freak us out when we found out that we were getting tracked across the internet and things like that. And now consumers are expecting you to know already know my habits and put the exact right thing in front of me, know how to market to me. How does that change from, B2C, B2B, et cetera? And, why is that a finding? I mean, that's my big question is, why did it make it into this report?
I think that's it. That's a great question. To me, lack of personalization and generalized marketing or generalized advertising or a generalized one size fits all is a lazy approach to doing business, full stop. And it always has been. But when access to data is so democratized as it is now, we all have access to data about our customers, about the people that we're working with. We can all simply look up a LinkedIn profile. There are some, base research tactics that still work when we're going to go engage with another human being, that when you don't do those things, it just feels like a very lazy approach to doing business. And so I think that our expectations are that nobody wants to see an ad for a car dealership in Northern California when they live in Southern Florida and are shopping for boots, right? That is a very big disconnect. And so I want Instagram to know that I'm shopping for boots, and I want them to show me those ads for those boots 4 or 5 days from now when I've put them in my shopping cart, but I wasn't really sure I wanted to buy them, et cetera, et cetera. Now, my husband's the opposite. He has all his tracking turned off. He uses fake names on everything. I shouldn't even be saying this on any sort of public forum. But then he gets literally upset when he's getting dealt the most random ads for strange things because he won't let them track anything about him. So it just cracks me up because I find it so useful and I'm using the tool all the time as a marketer. And he doesn't want it, but yet is upset that they're not doing a better job doing it for him. So,
do you think it has to do with almost like specialization in a way? And I guess this is kind of a half-baked thought, so I'm risking a lot by saying it a lot here. But do you think it has to do a little bit with specialization? Because I feel like future clients of yours, they want to see themselves reflected in your offering, and it's a way to differentiate and show that I am exactly what you need. Mm-hmm. And that's another kind of form of personalization that might apply more. I mean, we do more in the B2B space. So I was kind of trying to think about how to take what you said and apply it there.
Yeah, I think that's true in 2 ways. Number one, on that big macro level, that like we are solving a very specific problem, and we understand that we're not solving for 100 people, we're solving for these 10 people, and those 10 people are our customers, and that's who we're solving for. And I think that is specialization. But I also think there's there's just the personalization of approach, right? Where our one size fits all approach to doing business isn't going to be the same. Somebody who fills out a contact form on our website isn't going to want the same onboarding experience as somebody who picked up the phone and called our phone, right? Those are going to be 2 different ways of dealing with things. Somebody who's worked with us in the past is going to have a very different approach to working with us than somebody who's brand new. And so I don't think we can just shove people into, even in B2B space, when you're buying software or you're buying something. I don't think we can shove everybody into the same sales funnel anymore with the same rote set of steps along the way. I think it requires, agency owners like to say that what we do is very different than anybody else. We're very special snowflakes. No consultants can work with us because of what we do is so different. But the truth is, we're all running a business. We all look at the same sort of, P&Ls. We're all looking at the same numbers on a balance sheet. And so we just have, everybody has similar levers that they can push and pull, but knowing how those vary from customer to customer and client to client, what's going to really trigger somebody, I think is what personalization is about. Knowing that if you're selling to, or if the researcher, we talk about this when we're building marketing campaigns, no CEO is the one signing off on some new software purchase, right? That's not going to happen unless you're at a small company, 50 or fewer people. And so you're not selling to a CEO, you're selling to, maybe there's a coordinator who's doing a bunch of research and putting the list together. And maybe that researcher is sending it up the chain to the next level executive who can make the purchase decision. And so the information you're presenting to the people who are using the product versus buying the product versus deciding to buy the product could be very different people, and the information they need is going to be very different. So you have to make sure that all of that's available.
That sounds like an entire podcast episode
there. Yeah.
Because I mean, you're talking about how you're designing your products and services to meet, to kind of like attach to those specific buyers. Because, in healthcare, you could have everybody bought in for a piece of software, and it may not even be that expensive, and it'll get shut down by the CSIO.
Yep.
Right. So,
yep.
There's different. Yeah. Okay, we'll save that for another podcast episode.
It goes deep. It's for sure. It's very deep. So, and some brands are doing it really, really well. Like they really understand. One of my favorite use cases of that is like when you look at a conference. Have you seen these now? When you go to a conference and they produce a little convince your boss PDF that you can print out and take to your boss to get them to pay for the conference. I just thought, what a silly thing, because I'm sold as the attendee of the conference. I'm sold that I want to go. I just have to get the funds from somebody. And so the conference designers know that they have to convince somebody else that's not the actual attendee to come, to spend the money. So I like that.
That's awesome. Great example.
Yeah.
All right. Question number 5, or finding number 5, is customers crave experiences, and they state that there is evidence that suggests that customers are spending more money on experiences and less money on stuff.
Yeah.
It's funny that they use the word evidence, because being a data nerd, former scientist, evidence means that you don't have enough stuff to call it, data or anything like that. So maybe it's more qualitative. I'm not sure. Haven't dug that deep into the study. But do you think this is a more like B2C leaning finding, or does this apply to customers in other industries as well?
To me, the word experience is broad. And when I think about B2B, I think about the communities that B2B brands are building and the intense push. I mean, every B2B brand now has community and partner development roles that are just there to make sure that their users, that their customers feel like they're part of something bigger than just being a customer of this product, right? It's meant to build a community, and whether that's Slack channels or Reddit forums or, whatever those things are, they're running conferences and they're bringing people together and they're saying, we all are using this tool, but to solve our shared problems and to really, share this experience. And so I think that that's a big piece of it in the B2B world. In the B2C world, just look at the Barbie marketing campaigns. Have you seen any of this stuff? It's bananas. Like I'm not going to go out and buy a Barbie, but I do want to see the movie. It looks fantastic. It looks really funny. But the Barbie marketing machine has so many branded experiences out in the world. I mean, they've got partnerships with everyone. Just the coordination that went into that is mind blowing, but they've done a great job really like elevating that experience with Barbie. It's made me want to be participating in the Barbie world, which is not something I could have ever possibly imagined.
I am very proud and happy to say that whatever personalization is getting thrown at me, it is not involved Barbie. So
Oh, you have to go read about it though. The stuff they're doing is incredible. They bought a whole Malibu dream
I
mansion.
have seen the Dream Mansion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to miss some of that.
Yep.
All right, number 6, wellness wins. Every study or report is just a snapshot in time. We know that, right? Like as soon as you write
Yep.
your findings down, they're aging. So as of right now, there is a trend in these data that suggests that customers are focused on wellness. Does that speak well for certain products or industries, or else how might that apply kind of across the board?
I do. I think that's huge. And I do think, when you and I talk about how our customers are not just our customers as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, my customer is my employees and my team. And so when we think about how it applies across the board, I have to think about mental health and behavioral health and emotional wellness of my team so that we can provide a great service for our clients. And I think that that's across the board. People look more closely and are looking more intensely at organizations from which they're going to buy, and not just their product and product success, but how they are and treat their employees as a company. I mean, there's been 1,000 stories of the folks blowing up on YouTube and putting, just terrible things out into the world. There was the agency owner in Utah who suggested that somebody give up their family dog because he required everybody come back to the office and this dog couldn't be left alone. So we might just have to make some sacrifices. But there's so many examples of bad behavior that when we see a good one, I think people are latching onto that.
Employee experience is so obviously a subset of customer experience to me. It's just a different product that they're buying. And a lot of that is the environment. Sure, it's salary and stuff like that too, but it's the environment and flexibility and safety and how that company supports their ambitions and purpose in life. So yeah, that's a great point. Um, Great point. All right, number 7. Number 7 is the economy is existential.
So bold.
What was that movie? I Heart Huckabees, where they were existential detectives, and they were
Yeah.
so good. All right, so the question is: so we've got these macroeconomic, geopolitical stressors, obviously that are currently affecting spending on things like R&D. Um, there's also a crunch on VC capital. The cost of capital has risen, with interest rates and everything. And we've just got this really weird job market, especially in that kind of knowledge work space. Um, how are these external forces affecting CX directly?
Well, when I think about it for our clients, it's a much longer time to close. Our deal cycles are much longer than they ever were before. And so economic pressures that they feel trickle down to everything else down the line. And so unfortunately, marketing and often CX are things that they're cutting instead of investing in my mind, CX is where they could be investing to make sure that their churn rates are lower, to make sure that they're really doing the best that they can for the folks that they've got and building product and building features that are meant for the people there, focusing less on signing up new folks. But I will say that I think there's a lot of following. We're just seeing these massive layoffs from the largest organizations. And so I think there's a lot of mid-market organizations who are just sort of holding their breath, waiting to see when the next shoe is going to drop. I don't think they're being hit. At least our clients are not being hit as hard as a 10% staff reduction might make it seem.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a lot of people who are proactively thinking through, what does this look like if we need to do this, and at what point are we running out of our runway here? So
Yeah, it's interesting to me because number one, you've got a lot of smart people that are potentially starting companies and everything. I mean, like especially in the tech
yeah.
world, the type of talent that is walking out the door, they're bound to go solve some problems and be entrepreneurial, and that's going to be really cool to watch. And two, I tend to think of my business and the other businesses that I've been a part of as this long-term plan. And a lot of the crunch on VC capital is crunching the companies that are that growth at all costs kind of mindset. And it's, if like statistically, you have to go out and get more customers, significantly more than your churn rate, right? So if you think
Yep.
about that priority, like there's not a single SaaS company out there that would tell you that churn is not a priority, right?
Yep.
It's always a priority. It would be naive to say otherwise. But they're generally more focused on going out and grabbing as much of the market as they can. That's the whole purpose of spending more money to get a client or to get a new customer than potentially their lifetime, is so that you can have some dominance later on when your curve kind of smooths out. And those companies are being forced to sort of adopt a different mindset and extend their runway. And I think that's just very hard for them. So I don't really have like a clear thought about that, except that it'll be interesting to see how some of that shakes out. Ready for our last
I'm
big
ready.
finding in the World 50 new customer report? Um, yeah, no surprise here. Environmental, social governance, or ESG, is what their finding says. ESG is under pressure. So with ESG getting squeezed in at least the companies that are part of that World 50 organization, or their survey group, do you think this is just due to the same capital crunch we were just talking about and shrinking budgets, or is it just, are buyers expecting ESG to be table stakes now and they don't want to pay extra for it?
Until about a month ago, I would have told you that ESG is table stakes and people are expecting it. And then we see moves like Patagonia and the stuff that they're doing, and we're seeing moves, the insane amount of human rights legislature that's being pushed through, and the brands who are actually taking a stand and making their values known and saying no. I mean, I'm loving the fight between Walt Disney and DeSantis in Florida right now. It's you don't We're kind of seeing stance taking on environmental and social topics where we weren't before, because the stakes are higher now, which I almost didn't expect. We expect to see some level of diversity and inclusion. I mean, Chick-fil-A is getting heat now because they have a VP of DEI, which, Chick-fil-A being one of the historically most anti-LGBTQ organizations in the country, actually understands that you should be building a company that actually reflects your customer, with the diversity of the population you're trying to serve. And so when Chick-fil-A takes that on, we assume it's table stakes, but yet the stakes are higher now, and people are actually stepping up and flying their pride flags and putting a stake in the ground to say that what's going on in our country right now, or with the different legislature, just doesn't jive with good business in so many different ways. So yeah, I think this might have been true when it was published a month and a half ago, but I think things have changed a little bit in the last 4 to 6 weeks. I really do.
Well, that's a good point, because things are always changing, right? So
Yeah, for sure.
you can't make a report once a year and expect to know how your customers feel. So
Yeah.
um, very good. Any final thoughts you want to add to this?
No, I think that was the perfect final thought, John. Just that, your customers are always changing. And so knowing what temperature they're at when they're there is important. And so building some sort of program where you're actually soliciting feedback, even if it's just, for us as an agency, we have a VP of client experience who reaches out and makes quarterly phone calls to everybody and says, hey, where's your head at? How are you feeling about this? Are we still jiving in this way? Where do we think we're going? What's happening? But obviously there's multiple quantitative ways that make it a lot easier as well. So I think it's important just to keep, checking the pulse and making sure you have a good handle on whatever the vibe is.
Love it. Well, thanks a lot
Yeah,
for spending some time with me, and
for sure.
we'll chat again soon.